Well, it's been a week since you guys haven't heard of me, besides Twitter, where I updated a little bit, Discord, and also Instagram, which basically means that you have heard of me very clearly. I was just wondering, like, do you remember this face? Do you remember who Saiku used to be in this community? Like, hello? But I know you guys love these unit tutorials that we make in Unity, so I decided, hey, even though I'm getting a little sick, I'm still going to make a video and a brand new episode of this series for you guys. Nice guy syndrome, I know, thank you for acknowledging. And in this video, we're going to begin by turning our game into an FPS to have some of its core elements and features apply to our game. And in the previous episode, we also added player interaction, so to develop that further, this time around, we're going to let our players hurt each other. And no, I do not mean it the way you think, Brian, stop. But at the end of this episode, we'll basically have two different FPS rigid bodies that can spawn as two clients basically, and these will both have their own guns and they can also shoot at each other, which will deal damage. And with that being said, guys, hope you all do enjoy this episode, and if you do, make sure to leave a like down below. It really shows a lot of support. The thumbs ups are very appreciated. And now without further ado, let's begin with the video and see how we're gonna convert this game into an FPS.
I'm covering my ears like a kid. When your words mean nothing, I go la la la. I'm turning up the volume when you speak. 'Cause if my heart
Hey guys, it's Saiku Sam here, and welcome back to another episode of the unit tutorials in Unity. So, just a little bit of pre-work that I did before recording the video. I basically created a new folder inside of our project tab, called it textures, and inside of it I basically imported a grid texture through Google. If you want to find the exact same one, I'm gonna link it in the description to make it easier for you, so you can go ahead and do so in case you want to use the exact same one. And I also created a plane in our scene, and I actually added that grid texture to the plane to get this nice little look here. And now what we're gonna do here is basically first and foremost right click in the project tab, select import package, and then go through the characters. This will basically import the FPS characters, so just click on import and you will have the character done in just a moment. So when that's finished, you'll basically go to standard assets, pick characters, first person, prefabs, rigid body FPS controller. That's the one you're gonna drag into the scene. You can play around with the height a little bit and positioning, and then you can rotate it as you want to. And the most important part here is that we are now going to rename this to player. There we go. And we are also going to set the tag to be player as well. Next up, we're going to add a couple of components to our players. So first and foremost, we can add one called network transform, which will also take care of adding network identity, which is perfect. And you also want to make sure to check local player authority instead of network identity. Next up, you can also add another component. This one is going to be called player, and this is actually a script that we have created in the earlier episodes. And if you haven't watched them, I'm gonna link a playlist in the description so that you can check it out from episode 1 moving upwards. Now what we're gonna do is we are going to go to our assets folder, and in here we are going to drag and drop the player prefab, or basically the object from the hierarchy, onto the prefab itself, which is the player object, and this is done to overwrite, and we are going to pick replace anyway. Next up, we can actually open up our script here, which is the player script, and we can remove the CMD, which is being used for spawning the sphere itself, and we can also remove this if statement for key code I, so that we don't really spawn any spheres. And there we go, that is pretty much it. And now we're gonna go back to Unity, and we can also remove, or pretty much delete, the player sphere script that we have created here. There we go. And now you might be getting some errors in case you didn't, delete everything else or remove every other line that we did from the player script. So make sure that you do this before deleting that script, or else just do it now after deleting the script. That's just very important. We can also remove this if statement here, and we can also go up a little bit and remove the player sphere public variable that we have created. Then you can save the script, go back to Unity, and ensure that it compiles here in the inspector. There we go. Now what you want to do is you want to go to the assets folder, click on the player object, and inside of the player camera field in the inspector here, you want to drag and drop the main camera itself. We can also delete the player sphere from here, so just delete the prefab itself. Now one more thing that we want to do is go to our game manager, and inside of the network manager for the player object, or the player prefab rather, make sure that player object is set there. Now we are going to do a couple more steps here. So first and foremost, go ahead and open up your asset store, and first and foremost download and import close quarters assault rifle into your project right here. If you don't want to use this asset, you don't need to, but I'm just using this as an example because it's free so that I can share it with you guys as well. When you're done with this part, you can go back to your scene and open up the close quarters assault rifle folder right here and drag in the prefab itself for the weapon. Now you can rescale this a little, place it in front of the player to ensure that it's visible, and we just basically want to make sure that this looks like the player's weapon. So like that. Move it down a little, maybe to the left, or to the right. That's not left, is it? There we go. I think that looks actually pretty good. So one more thing we want to do now is we want to drag and drop this assault rifle in the hierarchy into our main camera so that we make it a child. We can also rename this game object to weapon. And now we can go back to our assets folder and drag and drop the player here onto the player prefab so that we overwrite it once again, but this time with the weapon itself. Now that that's done, we are going to create a new sphere into our scene. We can maybe move it up a little bit so that we can see the size of it. We are perhaps going to have it right in front of the player, or at least try to get it there. There we go. Now it's visible. So we are going to make this one pretty small. So this is basically going to be the bullet itself that we are going to fire. I'm sorry that I couldn't find a actual bullet model through Asset Store, but we can rename this to bullet so that we don't lose track of it. And we are now going to also create a cube here. And we can actually make this cube the child of our player, set position to 0 in every axis, and then move it forward a little bit. And now we're going to change the parent of the cube from player to be the weapon. And we are now going to move it in front of the muzzle of that weapon. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Now we're going to rename the cube to bullet spawn point. That's not how you spell. That's not how you spell either. There we go. And basically this one is going to be used for simply telling the game, hey, we're going to spawn all the bullets from this gun from this spot right here. And now we can actually go back to the player code right here. So open up your Visual Studio or what kind of IDE you actually use. Let me know in the comments, by the way, what kind of IDE are you guys using, or a compiler? I'm using Visual Studio. I don't know about you guys, but I hope you're not a mono develop still. But yeah, let me just know in the comments. So we actually want to go ahead and add a new public game object variable here, and this one is going to be called bullet spawn point. And this is basically going to refer to the object that we just added. So we can now actually go to our assets folder, pick the player object, and for the bullet spawn point, oh, by the way, you know what? We can actually first and foremost overwrite this one more time so that we can actually see it. Now though, since the player object has one prefab, which is the main camera, which is like the main pretty much parent of all the other child objects in here, we're pretty much going to have to pick the bullet spawn point or refer to it through code, which is not a problem at all. So what you can easily do here is basically go to your void start and say if is local player equal to true, which basically means if this is the local player, then we have authority over it. Then we're going to set bullet spawn point equal to transform dot find, and then pretty much the root or the directory of that very transform. Although before doing this, we can actually change public game object bullet spawn point to public transform so that we can use this function itself. And now in here, we can easily say main camera, and make sure that you write it uppercase and lowercase. And then we can say weapon, because that's the next object that comes in the hierarchy. And then we can basically say bullet spawn point. Now, if I do remember correctly, we did write it with spaces. Yes, we did. So make sure to have spaces in between there as well. Now we are going to remove, or maybe we can keep it, but we can just disable mesh render and also box collider on the bullet spawn point, so that when we fire the bullet, it doesn't, you know, kind of reflect it or whatever. Speaking of the bullet, we are also going to turn it into a prefab, so we can drag it and drop it to the project tab. There we go, and that is pretty much it. Now, to the bullet prefab, we also want to add a network identity and also a network transform so that we can synchronize everything. And we can also check local player authority for the network identity. And one more thing we're going to do is we are going to go to our game manager, network manager component, and basically add the bullet as a registered spawnable prefab, which will allow us to basically spawn it inside of the server. And now we can actually go back to our player code here and we can jump a few lines down in the void update inside of our if statement, where we basically check if it is local player. And so if we have authority, we're gonna let the player click on mouse button. So we're gonna say if input.get mouse button down 0, which basically means left mouse button, then we're going to call a function said, we can actually say cmd shoot, because we are going to spawn the bullet through the server side. And since it is a CMD, we're going to spawn or pretty much create a new void, but it's going to be a little bit specific. So first and foremost, we're going to say a bracket, command, and bracket. Then we're gonna say void CMD shoot. There we go. And now we're gonna stop getting an error. And this CMD shoot is basically a shoot variable or a shoot function, but it's going to be called through the server rather than calling through the client. And first and foremost, we are now going to spawn our bullet itself whenever we try to shoot with our players. So first we can say game object, then we can call this underline bullet, which is going to be the bullet that we are going to synchronize through the server. So it is pretty much the same, but we are just referring to it as a game object so that we can have access to it. And then we're going to say game object inside of parentheses, which basically means we are spawning this as a game object. And now we're going to spawn it. So we're gonna say instantiate, then we can say bullet, and then perhaps, actually we can say bullet.gameObject, and then we can say transform.position, there we go, and then quaternion.identity, so that we set the default rotation to it. Oh, and of course we are going to spawn, we are going to spawn the bullet, so we need to refer to it, so we can actually have a public, we can just set it to be game object bullet. There we go. And after this line in the CMD or the command, we're basically going to say network server dot spawn with client authority, and then we're gonna say underline bullet, not just regular bullet, and then we're gonna say comma connection to client, which is basically going to connect this bullet that we are spawning to the server, so that we can actually say, hey, this client is spawning a bullet, he's shooting his gun, so spawn it and synchronize it throughout the server so that all the players and all the other clients can actually see it. Now we're gonna go back to Unity, enter our scripts folder, and we're gonna create a new C# script here. Let's just let it just compile a little bit. I was a little too fast for it. So we can call the script bullet, and we can basically open it up. And in this new script, we're going to say void update, and we're basically going to move this bullet forward by until it basically just expires. So we can actually say public float expire rate, which is going to be set through the inspector soon. And then inside of void update, we can say this.transform.translate will be vector3.forward time by time.delta time, which basically means every second. And then we're going to set a movement speed to it, so we can actually say move speed and create a new public float called move speed as well. There we go. We can also create another float here, but this one is going to be a private float, and we can actually say current timer, which is going to be calculated towards the expire rate. So inside of our void update, we're gonna jump a line down, and here we're gonna say current timer plus equal 1 by time delta time, which is basically once again every second. And underneath that, we are going to say if current timer is greater than or equal to expire rate, then we are going to destroy this .game object. There we go. Now we want to make sure to go to our assets folder once again, pick the player object, and inside of the inspector we are going to assign bullet to the bullet spot, and once again we're going to leave bullet spawn point to be empty for now because it is going to be assigned whenever we enter the game as the player. Now we can actually remove the bullet from our hierarchy and also the player object because we are pretty much done with these two. A couple more changes to do is, first and foremost, in the bullet prefab we are going to disable sphere, or perhaps we can keep it enabled but disable mesh renderer. And for the sphere collider, we are going to check is trigger, because or else we're always going to collide with the bullet bullet whenever we spawn it, and that's going to move our player randomly and kind of glitchy. I also moved down the plane a little bit in our scene, as you can see from the grid line that is visible now, because otherwise the player falls straight through the plane, and I don't really want to edit the code for now for, you know, changing up the player spawn point, so I'm just leaving it to be there. We would also like to go to our player script, and here where we basically spawn the bullet, we want to change it from being transform.position to bullet spawn point dot transform that position, because we're not trying to spawn it at the player itself, we're trying to spawn it at the bullet spawn point. I also just realized that I made a little mistake here, not a big one, but basically we can't see our bullets right now if you play the game because we have disabled the mesh renderer for the bullet prefab. So just go ahead and enable it once again. I don't know, I'm a little bit jet lagged still, don't blame me please. And now that you're already here, you can also add the component called bullet so that we actually have it here. And we are going to change the movement speed to be, perhaps try it out with 5, see if it's too fast or too slow. And these are two values that you really want to change up depending on your game you're creating. If you're just trying out like me, just go ahead and try it with 5 and see how it works. And expire rate, maybe in 10 seconds it's going to expire and pretty much destroy itself. Now the one little problem that we have is if we just shoot the gun right now, it's going to transform or pretty much move the bullet forward by every second, but it's still going to move it forward depending on the bullet spawn point, and we want to make sure that it follows the rotation of the weapon itself. One way of easily solving that is simply by going to the player component, and inside of the command shoot, below the line game object underline bullet etc, we're going to say underline bullet dot transform dot rotation equal to bullet spawn point dot transform dot rotation. So we're basically setting the current rotation of the bullet spawn point to be the same for the bullet. And now you might realize that it's kind of firing a little random, like towards the back of the bullet spawn point, which is not what the kind of result we want. And to easily solve that, we can basically go ahead and add our player object to the scene again, unfold this, unfold it until we see the bullet spawn point, and rotate it by about 180 degrees. We can also remove or pretty much just disable the mesh renderer for this very object, and just ensure that it is trigger for box collider. And now we can actually overwrite the player prefab by using this one that we just pretty much edited. Now you can also remove the player object once again from the hierarchy as well. And now if you try the game, it will work perfectly. Now we have a couple problems here. So if you play the game, build and play the game and connect with two different clients, one client will not be able to see the other person's weapon and the other one will not be able to see the other's weapon. The problem here is initially that we basically are disabling the main camera upon start of the game in case it's not the client that we are controlling right now as a player. And that results in one problem, which is basically disabling also the weapon since it is a child object of the main camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to tweak the system a little bit. And here in the void start where we had the player script, we're basically going to check is local player equal to true. Then we're going to set active to true, but we're not going to do it with the camera and we're not going to disable the camera either. So we're going to instead say player camera dot get component camera enabled equal to true here, and we can copy pasta and say false instead. One more thing that I just figured out, or pretty much remember from my old techniques or whatever you might call it, we're basically going to drag and drop the player object into our scene, and for the bullet spawn point we are actually, now mine is set because I already did this like, you know, before recording. But basically we're going to go to player object and set this bullet spawn point to be the bullet spawn point here. And now we are going to overwrite the prefab here. And this is basically going to result in the prefab being there all the time, which is perfect for us. Now next up, we also want to go to our code and we can actually remove this entire if statement, the line itself, where we basically check if it is, you know, the local player and then basically setting the bullet spawn point by finding it inside of the hierarchy. This is pretty much a better practice of doing so. In addition to that, we're also going to disable this entire thing by the script. So we're going to go to our player script and we are going to be using Unity standard assets .first or .characters .first person. There we go. So we're going to be using this library to pretty much get access to the rigid body FPS controller. And speaking of which, we can first and foremost tidy this up a little bit. So if is local player bracket and then else bracket once again. I hate when it does this. Auto syntax for me. There we go. It's not a problem though. I can just fix it very easily. There we go. So we're now going to copy this, paste it here. And now the most important part is we are going to say this.get component rigid body FPS controller, or rigid body first person controller dot enabled equal to false. And then we're going to set the, or no, sorry, this one is supposed to be true, and then the other one is going to be false. There we go. So false here and false here. Great. Alright, so a couple of changes that I made here before we cover up anything else is basically I went to the player prefab, went to network transform, increased the network send rate to 29, 30 actually, but maximum is, it drops down to 29. I'm actually not sure why it does that. But most importantly, so I changed the rotation to, it should be XYZ, and interpolate rotation factor should be 0, compressed rotation should be none, and then sync angular velocity should be checked in. This will basically correctly transform or synchronize the rotation of this very transform, which is the player. So make sure to do that as well. Next up here, after doing that change, we're going to go to our bullet script, and we're going to go ahead and create a void on trigger enter collider other. There we go. So this is going to be used for checking collision between the bullet and another object, which we're going to specify here by saying if other dot tag equal to, we can just say player, then we are going to do something like dealing damage. In fact, we can just say deal damage other, or maybe other player. There we go. And we're gonna have a private game object other player. There we go. And we're also going to create a public void deal damage, and then here we're going to say game object other player. There we go. Before entering anything here, we are actually going to go ahead and create a public float here, another one, and call it damage, or maybe damage rate. There we go. So this is going to be the float that we use to deal the damage to the player itself. So now, before we do anything here, we also want to access other player through this if statement. So other, or we can actually say other player equal to other dot game object. There we go. And inside of deal damage, we're basically going to say other player dot get component player dot health minus equal damage rate. And we're gonna quickly go to player script, have a new public float here called health, and now we're gonna be accessing it through this here. And then we're going to destroy this .game object, because we're gonna destroy the bullet as soon as it triggers with the player after dealing the damage. Now we can actually go back to Unity, open up the bullet prefab so that we can see it inside of the inspector. There we go, and we are going to increase the damage rate to, let's say 25. Ridiculous number, broken game. And we can actually set the movement speed to be 10, because I feel like that would fit a lot better. Now I can actually do like this. So I just built the game and I'm playing it right now. I'm just trying to set it so that, there we go. I think that's pretty good actually. So if we now, what I want to have your attention is basically here. I have this player right here inside of the Unity client, and then I'm connected with another client here by using Unity's client. And the Unity's client is open up in the inspector, and here we can see the health of it, right? So this should now go to minus 25 when I shoot him with this gun. So if I now shoot here, there we go. So as you can see, it does hit. Although, since we can't see the player, it's a little difficult for me to kind of like guess where the player is. Hope you guys enjoyed this brand new episode. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. It's super appreciated. And also let me know in the comments if you have any feedback or if you have any suggestions on features you would like me to add on to this game. We're not really creating a super serious game, but I'm trying to demonstrate how to use UNet and how to use the multiplayer systematics in Unity by obviously implementing them into your own game and using these features that we cover up. So let me know in the feedback section. Let me know in the, well, it is a feedback section, but let me know in the comments if you have any feedback, if you have any features you would like to suggest. Also, make sure to subscribe if you're new around here so that you stay up to tune for new videos that we upload. I do upload every Tuesday, Tuesday, Friday, Sunday. There you go. I was trying to be very professional with my like schedule right off the bat, like on top of my head, like yeah, I upload these days, but I kind of failed. So my bad. But anyway, hope you guys once again enjoyed. Make sure to drop a like, and I will either catch you in the comments or in the Discord server. See you guys. Peace out. Bye bye. Before ending the video, I also want to give a huge shout out to Cupola, Matt Clubfoot, Logan Barkley, and G.I. Jojo for all their support on Patreon. I really appreciate it, guys. And also, if you want to become a Patreon as well, you can click the link in the description and you'll be able to check out more information. See you guys in the comments.